my dear brothers and sisters. In order to understand what happened at the recent General Conference, it was important for me to help you understand some of the things that happened prior to the General Conference. In 2016, the Africa Initiative that was established in 2012, working along with all the delegates from Africa to General Conference, became so powerful, and then receiving the support from all the Episcopal leaders across Africa. We became so powerful in defending the faith that no decision by the liberals and progressives, no petition by them that came on the floor of General Conference passed. Because we were working along with all the evangelicals from America, the few from the Philippines, and the few from Eurasia. Eurasia is that country that it's part of Russia, but that's the evangelical part of the church that was in that block of area. And so they joining the African delegates were always in the majority. You would need like 862 delegates to General Conference. And now we end up having 500 plus. And so we always defeated the agenda of the liberals and progressives. When that happened in 2016, then they also organized a way forward committee. And then that's how we went on to a special General Conference session in St. Louis, Missouri. And then again, we defeated the plan of the regionalization plan and also the same-sex marriage plan that are all embedded into that. So, as all of these violations were going on, the UMC in Africa was still standing at the crossroads, trusting God at the crossroads. So in 2019, when we had a special section, special General Conference section in St. Louis, Missouri, this was the result. You had a traditional plan, I'll share more of that later, and the one church plan that has embedded into it same-sex marriage, LGBTQ people, regionalization, and all of that. So when we voted, those of the traditional plan won with 53.28%. I want you to know that this was a highly contested, vote, because the liberal and progressive had done so much from 2016 to mobilize resources all across America to make sure that majority of those going to the special section were liberals and progressives to support them. Then more than that, they came into Africa and began to persuade some African bishops to have their delegates to support them. And so we had some Episcopal areas in Africa that really supported them. We have a bishop in the Congo whose conference has about 56 or more delegates. They made him secretary to the entire council of bishops in the hope that he will bring his delegates over. And then these bishops from Africa were not allowing their delegates to interact with Africa Initiative anymore. Now, Africa Initiative is that body that was established here in Liberia to work along with all the delegates, providing training prior to General Conference so that they understand the issues and vote according to their conviction, but based upon their understanding of Scripture. And so they started infiltrating Africa. And they succeeded to some extent. However, the delegates were so determined to join the rest of Africans to vote against all those liberal agendas. Even though their bishop did not allow them to associate with the rest of the African delegates, but we're communicating via WhatsApp, and also Zoom. And eventually when we went on the floor to vote, even though few Africans joined the people under the duress of some of the African bishops, but the majority joined us, and we defeated the one church plan. But when we defeated the plan, violence broke out. But prior to that, I had spoken on the 23rd at a breakfast meeting where all the African delegates came in as head of the Africa Initiative, as the general coordinator of the Africa Initiative, representing all the delegates from Africa. I spoke, and God blessed me and anointed what I had to say to the extent that God used it to impact even delegates from other places. Okay? And the major message was Africa is not for sale. The church in Africa is not for sale. And we will not sell the church in Africa for American dollars, especially the liberal American dollars. And that message resonated with everyone, except for the liberals and progressive, of course. And like I say, one of my episodes, one of our leaders from the conference in Liberia was so afraid for me. And he thought somebody was going to harm me, but God protected me. But after we defeated them, we could not even pass through the entrance because there was huge demonstration. And here is one of the demonstration. These are all laborers who are right at the floor of the general conference. They have formed a huge circle and they are there chanting. And then other people came from outside and came and joined them and trying to attack us in the hall on the 26th of February, 2019 in St. Louis, Missouri. But God spared our life. We managed to escape through the back door to leave the hall because the laborers and progressive agenda was defeated. They were too sure that this time around they were going to pass it. And it did not happen. Now, keep that in mind so that when I begin to talk later on about where we are today, you will understand that this has been a process. And the Americans, when they are determined to do something, they don't care of the consequences. They will use money, they will use their political influence, they will use their economic influence, and use any influence they have to ensure that it can happen. And so, when we defeated them, they had this, they carried on a lot of demonstration in the place, and then they came together. Here are the laborers. You know, you see them, they have all their labor flags down here, and you see them wearing the different banners, and they're shouting and vowing that they will not obey the decision of the General Conference. So even though the General Conference voted to pass the traditional plan, as opposed to the one church plan designed to legalize homosexuality, the laborers and progressives vowed to violate the decisions of the General Conference until their desires to liberalize the church can be accomplished. And they did this with impunity. Nobody rebuked them. They in fact rained insults on African delegates. They said, let them go with their vote. We'll go with our money. And if you want to read on the UMC, you'll find all of this. You just need to go to www.umc.org. You can ask for the 2008 General Conference. Just for 2008 General Conference, information will come. 2019 General Conference, the information will come. All the information are available on the website of the United Methodist Church. So they violated, and from that time, they just went on. They just went on doing all kinds of things. So 2022, we were supposed to have the General Conference. By this time, COVID has subsided. In America, there were major meetings happening by the government, by other institutions. In fact, in 2022, the women division, and you know in any church, the women are in the majority, right? But the women division met in Florida for their quadrennial conference. COVID did not stop them. Even some of the bishops, the female bishops, attended this meeting. But when it was time for us to have the conference, the general conference, the council of bishops said, COVID is still around. We're not having the general conference. Meanwhile, they are going ahead and violating. You are saying that COVID is around, but you're not obeying the book of discipline. You're not obeying the general conference decision that we have all passed. You are still ordaining lesbians and gays as pastors in the church. You are still electing and consecrating gays as bishop in the church. So when this happened, and of course it was a strategy to see how they can annoy the evangelicals in the church so that they can leave. So that the entire church can be liberal in order for them to fulfill their purpose. Unfortunately, the evangelicals in America fell to it. And to be true to you, for some of us who are in Africa, who were associating with the evangelicals in America because they used to join us to vote against all the liberal agendas, we appeal to them. Say, why don't we just hold on? Why don't we just hold on and go to the next general conference and then be able to make the decision? No, we are tired. We can't stay here one more minute. You don't know the shoes that we are wearing because we are in our local churches, because the leadership of the church in America, the UMC in America, have become so liberal. Why the rules are there that we should not get involved with homosexuality? They are practicing it. In fact, during Christmas time, you will see two gays or two lesbians who are couple going to the altar to go light the Christmas light. And all these terrible things were happening. So people were fed up. There's not Christianity. We don't have the opportunity to preach the gospel anymore. People are leaving our churches. Our churches are becoming empty. As I speak to you, there are 200 or more churches. This is just in the Georgia area that are worshiping below 25 members. And the North Georgia Conference is at the verge of selling some of these churches because they can't pay their pastors anymore. And it has brought so much pain and heartache. Why? Because some of the few old persons that are left in the church had their grandparent or their great-grandparent buried behind the church. And if the church is sold, if a Muslim buys it, they will turn it to mosque, and no graves will not remain there. If an entertainment organization or center buys the church and transform it to a nightclub or some kind of a social club, the graves will not remain there. So they have to exhume the graves and take them somewhere. So it's been causing a lot of heartache. I have one of my friends, a pastor in the North Georgia area, who spent a year or two, that was just his job, counseling people in these different churches. That was just to let you know how damaging same-sex marriage practice, homosexuality in general, have been to the church in America, to the point where the church has plummeted. The church has reduced in number very badly. So when that was happening, like I said, the evangelicals fell in their trap. So they left. They said we can no longer remain in the church, and they moved out and they established what we call the Global Methodist Church. Some of you have been hearing about the Global Methodist Church. This is how the Global Methodist Church was started. They say, you know what, we want to share the gospel. We want to evangelize. We want to make disciples. We can't remain in the church here and ever make disciples. So we are leaving. So all of the evangelicals, let me say majority of them, because some people who are very old, they say, well, where will I go? Well, I'll go start a new denomination, be a part of a new denomination. Let me just say, let people do what they want to do. Me, I'll just come and worship my God. Those kind of people left, even though they're evangelical, they left in the church. All right? But the majority left. And those who left, okay, about 8,000 churches left. And they formed the Global Methodist Church. And these are all evangelicals, Bible-believing Christians, both pastors and lay people who left to form the Global Methodist Church. Now, you will understand why this time around when we went to the General Conference, we were defeated. Because the delegates from Africa, that were just about 170 or 176 persons, because some of our delegates did not receive visa to be able to go, we lost about 25% of our delegates who did not go because they did not have visa. They were denied visa, and some of them did not receive the invitation letter in time to process, their application for visa and all of that. So 25% of African delegates during this time at the General Conference in Charlotte did not show up. And a few of us who showed up once, they said, what can we do? The Americans, when the evangelicals left, the Americans that have the majority of delegates, they don't have the population for that, but that's the kind of a mathematics they formulated to ensure that they always had very huge delegates. So those who came were all laborers and progressives. So everything that came on the floor, they were just sweeping them. Besides that, the African delegates were not all voting in the interest of the African understanding of Christianity. Several African bishops were now supporting the agenda of the Americans United Methodists. They had infiltrated Africa, so actually they were buying time. They were buying time to annoy the evangelicals to leave the church. They were buying time to work on African bishops so that they can have their delegates to support them. So guess what? Every time prior to General Conference, we will mobilize all the delegates to go ahead, 1 week ahead. When we went 1 week ahead, we were able to overcome jet lag. Now, when you travel for about 26 to 30 hours from Africa to get to America, you are dead tired. And so, what we do is that we go 1 week ahead of time. All right, and we mobilize resources to stay in a camp area, and then we rest, and then we discuss the legislative issues that come to the General Conference so that we can be able to debate it very well. This time around, after they have worked on almost all of the African bishops, except for few, to make sure that their delegates don't associate with the Africa Initiative that were providing training for them, the folks who were organizing the General Conference, they said that they would not send the money for our ticket, because usually the money is sent to every annual conference, and the annual conference purchases the ticket for their delegates to go. So we have the money ahead of time, we can purchase our ticket, and we move on to America and stay there 1 week prior to the General Conference. But this time they said, no, we're not sending the money. We will keep the money and buy a ticket. If you go ahead and purchase a ticket ahead of time and you come, we'll not be responsible for you. And so they made things very difficult. Now they did not care that African delegates will suffer jet lag. And the way they organized it, they said, well, you should arrive in Charlotte on the 18th of April. And then you will have orientation from the 19th to the 21st of April. And then the General Conference itself will start on the 23rd. So if you travel from your country and then you go to America, you got 7 hours different, you got 6 hours different. For some people, 9 hours time difference. And you arrive there, you are dead tired. And the next day, you are starting orientation. How productive will you be? But that is what the people did. And then these people were Americans. And of course, the Americans did this because the one who beats the drum, our African proverb says, determines the way you dance. Now, you have to understand this. The American UMC had done everything to manage and control the worldwide UMC. So the American UMC contributes 99% of all the budgetary allotment. So they provide all the funding to support the budget. And all the annual conferences in Africa and in Europe and the Philippines, they contribute only 1%. Besides that, our brothers from the Congo who speak French, those from Mozambique who speak Spanish, did not have access to the resources. Everything was in English. So they were completely lost. Another thing that happened prior to the General Conference is that the bishops in Africa refused to have their annual conferences discuss the issue of regionalization. Even though they gather as bishops from Africa in Lubumbashi, in DR Congo, and voted among themselves to support regionalization. And these are all pressure coming from the American bishops who are predominantly liberal, telling the African bishop what to do. Now, why did they do that? Why did they do that, for God's sake? The answer is very simple. African bishops, in addition to whatever their annual conferences pay them, are being paid their salaries by the Episcopal funds, a fund that is controlled by the American United Methodist Church. And the American United Methodist Church supports that fund. Even though the African church tried to support it a little bit, but 1% of that total goes there. And so they pay the African bishops, and they pay all bishops around the world. They also pay for the operation of their offices. They pay for their transportation. So now when they tell the bishop, you got to do this, the bishop tend to follow to do it, even at the detriment of the annual conference that he or she is presiding over. So while we did not discuss anything about regionalization, the bishops were voting to support it. And prior to that, 2022, in Africa University, when the bishops gather for the first time since COVID happened in 2019, so the bishops did not meet. COVID happened, and then 2020, the bishop did not also meet. 2021, the bishop did not meet. Now in 2020, the president of the College of Bishops was the bishop in Sierra Leone. On August 16, 2020, he died in a ghastly accident. Now, one who have taught that when the African bishops gather at African University for the first time since 2019, they will have had a memorial service for their colleague who was the president of the African College of Bishops who died. They will have a memorial service for him or even discuss concerning him. But guess what? The entire discussion at that College of Bishop meeting in 2022 was centered around Africa Initiative. The African bishops had come to the conclusion that, oh, you know what happening? We don't want to work with Africa Initiative anymore. Even though we've been supporting Africa Initiative, we've been working along with Africa Initiative, but Africa Initiative is now supporting the Wesleyan Covenant Association. The Africa Initiative is associated with the Global Methodist Church. So we don't want to work with the Africa Initiative anymore, and we don't want Africa Initiative to do any ministry with our delegates in our annual conferences. African bishops. And what they did is no short of what we call neo-colonialism. Now, neo-colonialism is that practice where the colonial masters are no longer present in Africa, but their economic influence, their political influence, their social influence, and every influence is in Africa because they are using Africans against their own Africans. What did we do to the African bishops? What have we done wrong? Instead of defend the faith, instead of tell the Americans that you are wrong, will not support homosexuality, instead of vote against all their sinful practices they bring in the church. But the African bishop made that decision, even though that did not stop Africa Initiative, but that was part of the inroad to suppressing the influence of Africa Initiative. So now, for the 2024 General Conference, almost all the African African bishops did not allow their delegates to associate with Africa Initiative. So the guys went to the General Conference completely blind, not understanding anything, nothing about regionalization, nothing about anything. And today you have some clergy persons in the annual conference in Africa, some lay people who don't know anything about the history study of the General Conference, running around with regionalization because some bishops are supporting regionalization. And they don't even know that those bishops have been mandated by the Council of Bishops to ensure that regionalization passes in their annual conference, whether their annual conferences like it or not.